Most people fish for peace. I fished for memory. It was just after 6 in the morning when I walked barefoot out onto the dock, coffee mug in one hand, my old Daiwa spinning reel in the other. Mist curled off the water of Lake Callista like rising ghosts, and the only sound was the lonely cry of a heron somewhere downshore. This dock, worn, creaking, half-repaired with reclaimed wood, was the same one my uncle used to fish from. The same one I'd learned to tie a double clinch knot on. The same one where he told me, "You don't need a lot of words to be free. Just a rod and still water." Now here I was, years later, back in Pine Grove shores. Honorably discharged, fresh off a 20-month stint living in an airstream out west, and this lakeside house, left to me in Uncle Dennis's will, was supposed to be a reset button. I hadn't even unpacked everything when I decided fishing comes first. The first cast flew clean. The bobber plopped. I breathed in peace. Until I heard that damn electric whine. A slow-moving pontoon barge crept around the bend. At first, I thought it was one of the HOA maintenance teams doing early morning lake sweeps, maybe some algae control or floating debris removal. Then I saw the uniform, and the camera, and the woman behind the wheel. She docked like she was staking a claim. I didn't even turn around. I knew what was coming. "Excuse me, sir, are you a resident of Pine Grove Shores?" "Yep," I said without looking. "Mason Redford, Lot 39, fishing quietly on my own damn dock. Anything else?" There was a pause. Then, "You're in violation of HOA Code 14.2. Fishing from unauthorized structures on community waters is strictly prohibited." I turned to face her. Mid-50s, pastel polo shirt, oversized clipboard like it was a badge of honor. Victoria Langston. I'd seen her face on one of the pamphlets stuck to my mailbox. "Keeping Pine Grove Beautiful, a message from your HOA president." "And how exactly is this unauthorized?" I asked, pointing at the dock. "I own this land. I own this dock. It was in my uncle's deed, built in 1974. HOA was established in 89. Do the math." She took a photo of me and the fishing pole like I was a suspect in a crime scene. "The dock may be yours," she said smugly, "but the lake belongs to the HOA. Community property. You're not allowed to extract resources, fish included, without proper HOA permits." I laughed. "Lady, I'm catching bluegill, not drilling for oil." She handed me a folded notice. "Consider this your first warning. A fine of $1,500 has been issued. Failure to comply will result in daily penalties and potential lien placement." I blinked, then unfolded it slowly. Sure enough, there it was, in clean Helvetica font. Violation, unauthorized fishing from private dock, fine, $1,500, due in 10 business days. "You're serious?" "I'm always serious," she replied. Then pivoted back onto the boat. "Have a nice day, Mr. Redford. Please refrain from further unauthorized activity." The boat buzzed away, slicing a line through the mist. I stood there for a long time after she left, watching the bobber, watching it drift. No bite, just rage and confusion. I walked back into the house, dropped the rod, and went straight for the old steel lockbox in Uncle Dennis's closet. The key was taped under the drawer. Inside, paperwork, faded deeds, tax records, his military service discharge, and near the bottom, a folder labeled Pine Grove Shores Legal. Inside, a single-page document. Deed to Lot 39. Parcel includes dock extending 15 feet into Lake Callista. Dated April 17th, 1974. The next morning, the HOA put a flyer on every mailbox in Pine Grove Shores. I know because the neighbor's dog brought me mine, ripped in half and covered in slobber. Across the top, in red ink, "Violation alert, unauthorized fishing and aggressive behavior, Lot 39 resident." Below that, a grainy zoom-in photo of me holding a fishing rod on my own dock and a blurb warning the community to report further acts of defiance. Defiance? Apparently sitting in peace with a worm and a cup of coffee now qualified as sedition in HOA land. I flipped the flyer over. A list of other recent infractions was included. Unregistered dock structure, no HOA permit for shoreline modification, failure to pay lake access fee. I had been in the house 3 weeks. They were building a legal fantasy faster than I could mow the lawn. But I wasn't angry. Not anymore. I was focused. I called my friend Rachel Flynn, a real estate attorney I'd served with years ago. She'd helped navigate property disputes for veterans in rural areas and knew how to sniff out legal fraud like a bloodhound. When she picked up, I gave her the short version. "They're fining you for fishing on your own dock." "Yep. On a lake they don't technically own?" "Exactly." She chuckled. "Mason, are you sitting down?" "Why?" "Because this sounds fun." By noon, Rachel had emailed me the full legal index for Pine Grove Shores, bylaws, zoning variances, even archived newsletters. I dove into every PDF like it was a military op. What I found was revealing. The HOA had been collecting lake access dues for over a decade, but nowhere in the founding documents did it state the HOA legally owned the lake. They assumed it, they managed it, they collected money for it. But ownership? Nowhere. Meanwhile, Rachel's contact in the county recorder's office dug deeper into Lake Callista's history. Turns out, back in the 70s, the lake was constructed as part of a water management project under the now-defunct Everlake Utility Corp. After Everlake dissolved in 1998, the rights to the lake were never reassigned. And here's the kicker. In 2001, the HOA tried to purchase it, but the paperwork was never finalized. The application expired, the check bounced. They'd been operating under a legal illusion ever since. That night, I sat on the porch with a beer, rereading the summary report from Rachel. Legally unclaimed body of water, subject to quiet title claim and purchase under county reclamation statutes. Available for acquisition by private entity pending environmental inspection. Translation? I could buy it. All of it. I stared out at the lake, still, vast, deceptively peaceful. The moonlight shimmered across the surface like a secret waiting to be told. And in that moment, I realized something. This wasn't just about fishing. This was about power, about a group of paper tyrants bullying people into submission, using rules no one voted on and fees no one questioned. And now, I had a shot to turn their little kingdom into my own private pond. Rachel and I built a plan. First, I set up an LLC, Redford Ecological Management Group. Clean, non-threatening. Sounds like something that plants trees and hosts kayak cleanups. Then I filed a request with the county land office to begin a quiet title claim over Lake Callista. Supporting documents included environmental usage logs, deed maps from 1974, affidavits from neighbors. Yes, some were on my side. At the same time, Rachel submitted a Freedom of Information Act request to uncover HOA financials related to lake access dues. We wanted proof they were collecting money for a lake they didn't own. Spoiler, they were. By week 3, the HOA caught wind something was happening. Victoria Langston showed up at my doorstep again, same pastel polo, this time in lime green. "I've been informed you've been filing paperwork concerning the lake," she said, trying to sound casual. There's a particular silence that comes with knowing you're about to win. Not cocky, not loud, just still. The kind of stillness right before a torpedo hits the water. By the time I walked into the Pine County Recorder's office, I was carrying a thick brown envelope. Inside, all notarized deeds, the complete filing for quiet title, the environmental sign-off, a cashier's check. The woman behind the plexiglass window, Sue, her name tag said, looked up as I handed it over. "Lake Callista?" she asked, squinting at the first page. "That's the one." Her eyes widened a little. "You're buying the whole thing?" "Every drop." She whistled, tapping on her keyboard. "Can't say I've seen anyone do that before." I smiled. "Good. I like setting records." It wasn't cheap. Back taxes, filing fees, and a mandatory 2-year maintenance projection meant the total hit $114,600. I drained the rest of my savings and liquidated the investment account my uncle had left behind for projects that matter. This mattered. This was no longer about my dock. It was about every veteran, every retiree, every normal person who'd been pushed around by people in pastel polos with clipboards and a god complex. They thought they could fine me into submission. No, I just bought their kingdom. The paperwork was stamped at 4:12 p.m. Wednesday. By Friday, the legal ownership transfer was official. Lake Callista now belonged to Redford Ecological Management Group, aka me. That night I stood at the edge of the dock with a beer in one hand and a mallet in the other. The first sign I posted read, "Private waters. Trespassers will be prosecuted. By order of Redford Ecological Management Group. Effective immediately." I drove a stake into the earth at every former access point the HOA had built. The quote-unquote community kayak launch, the picnic pier, the quote-unquote floating swim platform. And I left one final sign near the HOA mailbox board. Notice, Lake Callista is now privately owned. No access permitted by HOA or affiliates. Violations will result in legal action. They noticed. Oh, they noticed. By sunrise Saturday, my phone had 17 missed calls, 12 voicemails, and a voicemail transcription from someone named Jeremy, HOA Vice President, begging to, quote, sit down and discuss options. Options? There were none. At 10 a.m., HOA held an, quote, emergency board meeting in the clubhouse. I wasn't invited, didn't matter. Half the community showed up anyway, some confused, some furious, others sipping coffee like they were watching a soap opera live. Victoria Langston stood at the front, voice tight. We're looking into this so-called ownership claim. It's clearly fraudulent. Mr. Redford is attempting to weaponize a loophole. Or just using the law, someone muttered. She ignored it. I want to remind residents that Lake Callista has always been part of Pine Grove Shores. Any attempts to enforce these so-called restrictions will be met with legal resistance. We will sue. We will fight. And what if he's right? A man near the back asked. You've been charging us lake fees for years. Where's that money gone? A ripple of murmurs spread. Victoria paled. She fumbled with her notes, her composure cracking. We've used that for maintenance, community events, liability coverage. But it was too late. Doubt had crept in, and doubt is poison to power. That afternoon, I met with Rachel at the cafe just outside town. She was sipping on an iced espresso, her laptop open, scrolling through HOA financial disclosures. You'll want to see this, she said, turning the screen. Line by line, transaction after transaction, HOA records showed unauthorized expenditures under the category of lake maintenance. Over $9,000 for, quote, kayak storage upgrades, none of which existed. $4,200 listed as emergency algae mitigation, $6,700 for dock insurance, even though no dock was HOA owned. Worse, it's amazing how fast panic travels across calm water. By sunrise on Monday, the signs were everywhere, 32 of them to be exact. I'd printed them at a local shop, heavy-duty weatherproof board, white on black lettering. Private waters, no trespassing, HOA access prohibited by order of Redford Ecological Management Group. Each was staked with 4-inch galvanized bolts into wood or stone. Boat launches, picnic decks, kayak racks, even the lakeside trail entrance behind the clubhouse now had one big, unapologetic slab of truth greeting every jogger. This lake is not yours anymore. The backlash began at 7:02 a.m. I know this because I watched Victoria Langston herself march toward the old swim dock, cell phone in one hand, disbelief on her face. She tried yanking one of the signs out of the ground. It didn't move. Then she screamed something I couldn't hear, then called someone. Probably a lawyer. Probably 5. By 9 a.m., the Pine Grove Shores Resident Forum had exploded. Is this even legal? I've already paid HOA dues for lake access this quarter. Does this mean our fishing derby is canceled? Why did the HOA lie to us? I scrolled through the posts with my coffee like it was the morning paper. One comment stood out. Can we even trust HOA leadership anymore? That was the sound of the tide turning. At 10:15 a.m., HOA sent out a community-wide clarification email. Subject line: Urgent! Illegitimate ownership claims by resident of Lot 39. It read like a tantrum in Times New Roman. Mr. Redford has acted unilaterally. His actions are not sanctioned. We are pursuing full legal recourse. Residents should refrain from engaging with posted signs. They ended it with, we remain committed to your access, your lake, your lifestyle. But it wasn't their lake anymore, and the only thing they were committed to was pretending they still held the leash. At 11 a.m., the local news van showed up. I had expected that. I even had the coffee pot warm. KTV Channel 9 community beat reporter. Mr. Redford, can you explain what happened? Sure. I said, they fined me for fishing, so I bought the lake. You bought the lake? I handed her a printed copy of the deed. She stared. This is real. I nodded. Real as the water behind me, which, by the way, they've been charging people to access illegally for years. That line made the evening news. So did the signs. So did the residents walking past them with stunned faces. And so did one HOA board member, Glenn Nichols, who told reporters off camera, honestly, he did everything by the book. I warned Victoria 2 years ago this would happen. She didn't listen. By Tuesday, the HOA called an urgent town hall meeting. This time, they invited me. So I showed up, wearing jeans, my old Navy ball cap, and the biggest grin I've had since Christmas 2003. The clubhouse was packed. Half the neighborhood came. Some stood in corners, others sat arms crossed, visibly split. Victoria Langston stood at the podium, face tight, lips thinner than her composure. I'll begin by addressing the elephant in the room. That you don't own the lake? Someone yelled. Chuckles. She ignored it. Mr. Redford has acted unilaterally. I stepped forward. It's not a loophole, I said calmly. It's a law you ignored. Several heads turned. All eyes were on me. You've been collecting lake access dues for over a decade, but you never secured ownership of the water. Not once. Not legally. We maintained it. That doesn't mean you owned it. I maintain my neighbor's dog sometimes, doesn't make it mine. Laughter rippled. Victoria's voice cracked. The lake was always considered community property. I held up the deed. This piece of paper says otherwise. Issued by Pine County, filed, stamped. They say court is where the truth comes to die. But that morning, I walked into the Pine County courthouse with one goal: to make truth louder than HOA lies. Victoria Langston and her lawyer, some puffed-up suit from a suburban law firm, had filed an injunction against me. Their claim? Redford's ownership of Lake Callista constitutes an illegitimate seizure of long-standing community property. His signage and restrictions infringe on historical easement rights and public recreational usage. Translation? He beat us fair and square, and we're throwing a tantrum in court. I wasn't worried. Rachel Flynn, calm, sharp, and already sipping coffee like it was just another Tuesday, whispered to me before the session started, "Relax, this is going to be fun." Judge Hayes, a man in his 60s with a marine pin on his robe, glanced over the folders stacked on his bench. "Let's make this clear from the start," he said, voice low and firm. "This is not a trial. This is a hearing, and I will not tolerate drama, speculation, or grandstanding." Victoria's lawyer stood, buttoned his coat, and launched into a monologue about generations of community stewardship and unwritten public trust. He used words like implied easement, emotional attachment, and even environmental continuity. Rachel let him finish, didn't interrupt once. Then she stood, calm, surgical. "Your Honor, what matters is this. The HOA never legally owned Lake Callista. They never filed title, never paid tax, never registered rights. They merely acted like owners." She slid the deed forward. "This is the only valid ownership document in the county registry, dated, signed, verified, and unchallenged by any other entity." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Miss Flynn, are you stating the HOA collected fees under false ownership?" She nodded. "Yes, and I have the records to prove it." She handed over the audit. The courtroom went still. We heard the paper shuffle for 5 long minutes. Then the judge looked directly at Victoria. "Mrs. Langston, were these charges, lake access fees, collected under the belief your organization owned the lake?" She swallowed. "Yes, Your Honor, but—" "Was that belief supported by any recorded legal claim?" Silence. Her lawyer stepped in. "We submit that the community's historical use constitutes an easement of access." Rachel leaned in. "But an easement must be granted by an owner. No such owner existed. And now, Your Honor, there is one. My client." Boom. The judge nodded, then asked, "Were these funds, these access fees, ever used for actual lake maintenance?" She hesitated, then made the fatal mistake. "They were used for various enhancements, events, signage, community cohesion." "But not lake maintenance?" "No," she admitted. Rachel smiled, just slightly. "Your Honor, we move that the HOA not only relinquish all claims, but be held liable for fraudulent misrepresentation and restitution of collected fees." Gasps rippled behind us. In the final 15 minutes, Rachel showed photographic proof of unapproved dock modifications, inflated maintenance budgets, board meeting minutes discussing how to keep Redford quiet. The last one stung. Victoria turned pale when Judge Hayes read the transcript out loud. "If we bury him in fines, he'll either move out or give up." His gavel hit the bench like thunder. Ruling. Mason Redford's ownership of Lake Callista was declared lawful and final. All HOA lake-related restrictions were deemed null and void. HOA was ordered to cease collection of all water-related dues. An independent auditor would be assigned to review HOA finances from the last 5 years. A restitution fund would be created for affected residents using HOA's general fund reserve. 3 months after the ruling, the lake was quieter than it had ever been. Not silent, no, not empty, just peaceful. The kind of peace that follows a storm. Earned, still, deserved. Most mornings I'd walk down to the dock barefoot, a thermos of coffee in one hand, my old Daiwa reel in the other. The dock was fully refinished now, planks smoothed, bolts secured, and a fresh coat of sealant. The sign near the start read, "Property of Redford Ecological Management Group. Permit fishing only. Welcome. Respect required." The community had changed, too. After the court case, residents pushed through a full HOA reform charter. Gone were the arbitrary fines, the secret meetings, the weaponized bylaws. The new board, led by Glenn Nichols, shifted from enforcers to facilitators. At their first public meeting, they invited me to speak. I almost declined, but Rachel convinced me. This isn't about revenge anymore, Mason. It's about closure. So I stood before the crowd, half of them new faces, half old skeptics turned quiet supporters, and said just this. All I ever wanted to do was fish in peace. I just didn't expect I'd have to buy a lake to get it. The room laughed, not nervously, genuinely. And that, I realized, was the real win. I set up a simple permit program through a tiny website Rachel helped me build. Free, one form, no nonsense. Families could fish, kids could swim, kayakers could drift across the glassy surface without fear of being fined for unauthorized paddling. The only rule? No HOA officers from the old regime. Not out of spite, out of principle. They ruled with power, not permission. Now they got neither. One afternoon I heard footsteps on gravel. It was Mr. Park again, the elderly gentleman who brought pie that first week. "Mind if I cast off next to you?" he asked, holding a dusty tackle box. "Only if you share your secret bait." We fished in silence for an hour. He didn't catch a thing, neither did I. Didn't matter. It wasn't about fish. A week later I got a letter, handwritten, no return address. Inside, a short note. "You reminded us what ownership really means. Not just land, but responsibility. Thank you, Mason." A neighbor. I kept it pinned to the inside of my tackle box. By the start of fall, the trees had begun to turn. Maples flared red and gold around the lake, mirrored perfectly in the calm water. Children laughed from paddleboards. Someone set up a picnic near the sandy shore. A veteran I didn't know saluted me from a canoe. And for the first time in years, Pine Grove Shores didn't feel like a gated community. It felt like a neighborhood again. I built one last thing. A bench at the far end of the dock. Simple cedar, no backrest. On it, a plaque. For Uncle Dennis, who taught me the quiet was worth defending. Next to it, another plaque. They fined me for fishing, so I bought the lake. Now everyone who deserves it can fish in peace. The ripples carried far beyond the lake. Local news did a follow-up story. Then a regional podcast picked it up. Soon, strangers were emailing to say thanks, sharing their own HOA horror stories. Some even took legal action after learning their associations had similar legal blind spots. And across every story, one phrase kept popping up. He bought the lake. It became something more than a headline. It became a warning to abusers and a rally cry for the quiet ones. The last scene I'll share with you is this.